Theresa May heads to Brussels for last-minute talks with the EU as Spain and the DUP threaten to derail her Brexit deal.
The US government report gives a sharp warning about climate change, just days after Donald Trump questioned the effects of global warming.
Why put the kettle on?
Could you have rare footage of Sir David Attenborough hiding in your attic? Scientists call for the public's help to track down a missing TV lecture.
In sport, a Welsh warning to the world. If they beat South Africa this afternoon, they'll have won all 4 autumn internationals for the first time. And with the World Cup less than a year away, England also host Australia today.
Good morning. It's looking pretty chilly again this weekend for most of us. At least on the plus side, most places will be dry. There is some rain in the forecast, particularly across southern areas. So join me later for a full weather roundup.
It's Saturday, the 24th of November. A very good morning. Our top story, Theresa May is heading to Brussels to attempt to finalise her Brexit deal with EU leaders.
The Prime Minister is hoping the plans will be approved at a summit on Sunday, but Spain's Prime Minister has threatened to derail that timetable if he doesn't get further reassurances of the status of Gibraltar.
Well, in a moment, we'll speak to our reporter Gavin Lee, who's in Brussels. First, our political correspondent Layla Nafi, who's in our London newsroom. Layla, very good morning. Theresa May has been out and about trying to win the support of members of the public. Is her tactic paying off?
Morning, Tina. Well, that is exactly right. Theresa May has been on the hard sell with her Brexit strategy, acutely aware that there is a lot of opposition to it within the House of Commons. So she is trying to bypass MPs for the moment and say to the public, look, this is the best deal we're going to get. It's not about going back to renegotiate, selling the merits of the deal as the one that delivers on the referendum result. She's got these negotiations, these last-minute tinkering on the EU side this weekend, but she will be looking ahead to next week when the Parliamentary battle looms. She's already had her allies in Westminster, the Democratic Unionists, angry about the provisions for the Northern Irish border in that withdrawal agreement. She has got plenty of MPs from her own side saying that they cannot possibly back the deal. So she is concentrating on trying to win the support of the public in order that constituents may put pressure on their own MPs to back the deal and not risk the chaos that voting against it would surely unleash.
Layla Nafi, thank you very much.
Let's go straight to Gavin, who's in Brussels for us now. So the Prime Minister en route a little later on to where you are. Take us through what will happen across the weekend.
Well, you know, there's an air of mystery as to why Theresa May is coming here today, because on the one hand, the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration, the divorce deal and the future relationships of prospect blueprints are going to be agreed and endorsed tomorrow, and they have been signed and sealed and closed, in the words of EU officials. And other EU diplomats meeting last night were saying, well, what are the British doing? Are they going to try to tinker with it? Because remember, other countries, the Belgians, the French, the Portuguese, wanted changes to fishing, for example, to have rights of access to British waters. But at the moment we're being told this is preparing for tomorrow meetings. Jean-Claude Juncker, the head of the European Commission, and meeting the man who's a conduit for these talks, Donald Tusk, the head of the European Council. The other thing to bear in mind is Spain is still saying, and the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez making clear again last night, that he thinks they could call the thing off if they're not satisfied on Gibraltar. They want in writing legal text from Britain saying any future relationship which involves Gibraltar needs the sign-off from Spain. Theresa May is saying she is speaking to the Spanish Prime Minister. So far, the Spanish aren't letting up.
Gavin, thank you for that. It's Gavin Lee in Brussels for us this morning.
Meanwhile, the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Arlene Foster, is expected to reiterate her opposition to the proposed Brexit deal when she addresses its annual conference today. The DUP is concerned that plans to prevent checks on the Irish border would leave Northern Ireland too closely tied to the EU. Last night, Mrs Foster said her party would reconsider its agreement to prop up Mrs May's government if the Brexit deal was passed by Parliament.
That agreement was about giving national stability. It was acting in the national interest and delivering on Brexit. If this is not going to deliver on Brexit, then of course that brings us back to the situation of looking at the confidence and supply agreement. But we're not there yet, and we're not going to jump ahead until we see what happens in Parliament.
Climate change will cost the US hundreds of billions of dollars by the end of the century. That's according to a major government report.
It says human health and agriculture are seriously at risk and the poor will suffer most. The White House has dismissed the findings, though, as inaccurate. Here's our North America correspondent, James Cook.
This, say many scientists, is what climate change looks like. In recent years, California has seen bigger, deadlier and more destructive wildfires than ever before. During a cold snap in Washington this week, President Trump tweeted, "Whatever happened to global warming?" Now his own government experts have answered the question. It's here, they say. Its effects are serious, and without dramatic change, they will be catastrophic. Already, says the report, more frequent and intense storms like Hurricane Harvey, which ravaged Houston in Texas, are destroying property and may damage critical infrastructure such as bridges, power plants and oil refineries. Crop yields and labour productivity will decline. There will be a rise in the spread of tropical disease. The poorest Americans will be hardest hit.
One of the things that's quite striking about the report, for example, is that we could see a future where the southeastern parts of the United States experience forest fire seasons that look like what happens in the West right now.
The scientists say substantial and sustained reductions in global greenhouse gas emissions are essential, and they do report some progress. Without major urgent action, says the report, the impacts of climate change will soon cascade into every corner of American life. James Cook, BBC News, Los Angeles.
A police officer has been stabbed in East London. British Transport Police said the male officer was attacked with a knife outside Ilford train station. His injuries aren't thought to be life-threatening.
The Home Office is investigating how an adult asylum seeker was allowed to take up a place at a school in Ipswich. The man, who is posing as a 15-year-old, enrolled at Stoke High School. It's believed he may be as old as 30 and could now face deportation.
Early reports show Black Friday spending has fallen compared to last year, even though there were more transactions overall. Barclaycard, which is responsible for processing nearly half of all UK debit and credit card transactions, said it had seen a 12% drop in the total spent. That's compared to the same period a year ago.
A new nasal swab test for flu, which can give a diagnosis in just 20 minutes, has helped to significantly reduce bed blocking and unnecessary admissions in hospitals. It was used in trials at 2 hospital trusts in Norwich and South London and avoids the need for putting patients in isolation. Other flu tests can take several days to return results.
The search is on for missing footage of Sir David Attenborough, first aired on the BBC almost 50 years ago.
Staff at the Royal Institution are asking the public to look in their attics for any recordings of their Christmas science lectures, including those by Sir David, after realising 31 broadcasts are actually missing from their collection. Our correspondent David Sillito has more.
We will have a little protein dance. Okay?
Carl Sagan in 1977 doing the protein dance.
Very good. Can you get a different note on it?
Christopher Zeman and the science of music.
Heart rate 126. You must be calming down, Robert. How do you feel now compared to before? Great.
These lectures have been a Christmas tradition since 1825 and were first broadcast on the BBC in 1936. But not all of them have survived in the archive. Some of David Attenborough's lectures from 1973 have gone missing. There are also gaps in 66, 67, 69, 70 and 71. The Royal Institution was to put all of these televised lectures online and is asking the public if they have copies of the missing programmes hidden in a loft or stored in a garage. They were television's first ever science programme, and they're hoping that some of their technologically inclined viewers might be able to help them complete the full collection. David Sillito, BBC News.
We've been on air for 2 hours broadcasting that material. We have yet to get a call from anyone saying they've found anything. So
yes, but also just to make clear that we're looking for footage of David Attenborough, not footage of David Attenborough hiding in an attic, or in your attic.
It could be that the footage is in your attic, not Sir David Attenborough. That would be a surprise.
It really
Mind you, if Sir David Attenborough is in your attic, that would also be quite a big story.
That's really
8:10 is the time now.
Yes. The National Crime Agency has issued a warning to organised gangs, which it says are behind a A recent spike in illegal attempts to cross the English Channel.
On Friday, 8 Iranian people were brought ashore after their dinghy was spotted off the coast of Kent. Brings the total number of suspected migrants to have reached the UK this month to 101. Our reporter Keith Doyle has more.
These men were found in a dinghy by a Border Force patrol boat in the Channel yesterday. The 8 men, who say they are Iranian, were taken into custody and interviewed by immigration officers. The day before, 14 people were found in 2 dinghies in the Channel. French authorities found another 11 suspected migrants on the same day. There's been a huge rise in the number of people trying to cross the Channel in small boats. In the past month, 101 suspected migrants have been found, including 9 people found on rocks at Folkestone. 3 boats with 24 suspected migrants, including a toddler, were picked up off Dover and Ramsgate. And 7 men were rescued from a dinghy after making a distress call.
You need to see the Home Office and the French authorities work together to put a stop to this trafficking network. Nearly 100 refugees have been coming across the Channel in recent weeks. It's only a matter of time before there's a tragedy, and that's why the Home Office in particular needs to get a grip and have a plan.
The National Crime Agency says organised crime groups are using these small craft to traffic people, but they're working with the French authorities to stop them. This week, 2 men were jailed for 8 years for smuggling people across the Channel. This is one of the inflatable boats they used. Most people smuggling takes place at ports, but increased security there and the calm weather may be making more people risk their lives by trying to cross the Channel in small, totally unsuitable craft. Keith Doyle, BBC News.
So, 12 minutes past 8 is the time. Lots of people got plans for the weekend this weekend. Sav, tell us, what's it going to be like?
Thank you, Charlie and Tina. Good morning to you. It's looking pretty fine this weekend. For most of us, it should be dry. It's going to stay quite cold, though. We've still got that cold air mass moving on, an easterly wind. And it's southern areas which will see most of the rain, certainly through today. Now, it's been very wet across the southwest in the last 24 hours. Seen some thunder and lightning as well across Cornwall and Devon. It's still raining there at the moment there in Topsham in Devon. It's all thanks to this area of low pressure and its weather front, which will linger throughout the day across southern areas. Further north, it's a dry story close to the area of high pressure to the north of the UK. Could see a few showers across eastern areas, a bit of mist and murk too, but most of the rainfall will be falling across southern counties of England. Now, I think the heaviest of the rain south of the M4 corridor. Could see a little bit of rain moving northwards this afternoon into the Midlands. Notice the temperatures on 7 or 8 degrees, so it's going to feel a bit cooler than it did yesterday. Eastern parts of the Pennines will see thicker cloud with 1 or 2 showers, but it's west of the Pennines and into Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, where we'll see the best of the sunshine. So into this evening, stays quite damp across the south, but I think through the night it should turn a bit drier here, though that area of low pressure brings some wet weather to the Channel Islands as we reach the early hours. Elsewhere, variable cloud. Temperatures should stay above freezing, but where you get some clear spells further west, like this morning, there could be some pockets of frost. We're still in the cold air mass for Sunday. That easterly breeze, light to moderate, so it will feel quite cold again, maybe even a touch colder tomorrow than what we'll see through this afternoon. Again, there'll be the thickest of the cloud, eastern parts of Scotland and England, a few showers here, the odd heavier one. Better day, I think, across the south, certainly for the southwest, with maybe a little bit of brightness. We could see some of that rain over the Channel just pushing northwards into the southeast of England. And again, I think the best of the sunshine will be central and western areas. Monday's a similar story, the last of this quiet, cold weather with variable cloud and some mist and murk. Again, the best of the sunshine further west, a dry story across southern areas, but those temperatures, again, still mid to upper single figures, 6 to 8 or 9 degrees. But it's all change as we head on through next week. Certainly from Tuesday onwards, we start to pick up a mild southwesterly. The Atlantic comes back to life, but it'll throw in our direction some pretty deep areas of low pressure. So we're looking at some very wet and windy weather, particularly on Wednesday, where we could see gales or even severe gales across western areas, along with spells of heavy rain. But there will be some sunshine around too, and notice the temperatures touching double figures for many of us on Wednesday. Tina and Charlie.
Thank you. We'll see you later on.
Thank you very much.
So this week, 2 energy firms went into administration, affecting more than 400,000 customers.
It brings the number of failed energy companies this year to 7. So what does the future hold for the 60 or so smaller suppliers that often offer the cheapest prices? Well, let's get more from Paul Lewis from Radio 4's Money Box programme. Good morning, Paul. Why have these companies gone bust?
Well, I think the market is just very difficult for small companies. Energy prices are the price they pay to buy the energy. The wholesale price is fluctuating quite a lot. It's very high now, much higher than it's been for a year or so. And I think they're just finding trading conditions. Let me just read you what Spark Energy, which was one of them that went out of business just yesterday. It said, we were unable to continue supplying customers due to increasingly tough trading conditions, and its chief executive had said earlier, these are difficult times impacting suppliers big and small across the country. So I think they are just having a very difficult time to keep up with the big 6 who have tens of millions of customers, whereas theirs are measured in the low hundreds of thousands.
Is it just the case that they can't compete then with the bigger companies and their margins are a lot smaller then, and that's why they're going out of business when those wholesale prices are fluctuating?
Well, that's certainly one reason. They're less able to buy energy in advance. It's called forward buying, and the big companies buy it in advance. So what they're selling you today, they probably bought a while ago when prices were different, and that gives them a more even spread of pricing over the years. That's harder for a small company to do. And also they're being forced to cut their prices to the bone because, as you said, there are more than 60 of them, and switching is easy. People switch from one to another very, very easily and quickly, and of course that means they've got to be offering the lowest price to get the customers. So it really is difficult for small suppliers to bear these market changes.
What does this mean, Paul, for customers first of all, but also for people's jobs?
Well, their jobs will be lost. I think Spark Energy, I think there's 400 people in Scotland who will probably lose their jobs. What happens to customers, though, is much less bad. They will be taken over by another supplier, and that supplier will be appointed by Ofgem, the regulator. So there'll be no loss of supply. You'll still get your electricity and your gas coming through, but the person you pay or the company you pay for the bill will change. And I think another indication of how difficult trading is for these smaller companies is another one called Outfox the Market. Now, no suggestion it's in difficulties, but it decided this week, last week rather, that it would all its customers would pay more in the winter and less in the summer. So instead of spreading costs evenly and making a bit more in the summer, making a bit less in the winter, it suddenly wrote to people putting up their direct debits initially by 70%, but now by more like 40% after a mistake was discovered. One person we spoke to had been paying £116 a month, and she was told that would rise to £202 a month. Quite a shock in December, just before Christmas.
Yeah, 70%, that is a huge shock. Paul Lewis, thank you very much indeed, and you can hear more from Paul on Radio 4 today at midday.
18 minutes past 8 the time now. That means it's time for a look at the newspapers. Former Chief Executive of the Football Association, David Davis, is back with us this morning to have a look through some of the front pages.
Good morning.
The inside pages. We'll take you through the front pages first, and I think our starting point is the Times this morning. Footage of the Met Police knocking suspected criminals from their mopeds makes the front page. You may have seen that in some of the reporting yesterday. Tactic labelled controversial. The article says it's helping cut this type of offence by a third.
The Guardian, meanwhile, leads with its own investigation into companies which own the UK's worst-rated care homes. Firms which own homes assessed as inadequate still made a total profit of £113 million last year, according to the paper, even though they are failing to look after some of the vulnerable people who are being neglected.
On the front page of the Mail, it's a leaked email from a company which runs Kent's out-of-hours GP care. According to the paper, managers said there were just 2 GPs on duty over one weekend. That was in September, covering more than 1.4 million patients.
And finally, The Sun leads with a story on Chelsea FC footballer N'Golo Kante, who signed a deal which will see him pay more tax than Amazon and Starbucks combined. The 27-year-old chose not to use a scheme to be paid via offshore firms, meaning he will pay £6.7 million in tax.
David, you spent a long time in football. Do you ever have those moments still where you go, really? That's a lot of money?
That's one of them. That's one of them. But I mean,
What do you make of
nice
that?
work if you can get it, I suppose. But it's extraordinary. I mean, it's an extraordinary story. But he feels strongly about it, as I understand it. And, you know, I'm not going to get into the issues around Amazon and others, but it is an extraordinary story.
Back in the real world, we're talking about policing, something that's really close to people's
I used to say that at the FA quite a lot.
Did you? Back in the real world. You're talking about cuts in police forces, story we've been doing a lot on. And police chiefs are getting... Well, do you think increasingly outspoken about, you know, the reality of what's happening?
Do you know something? At just about any other time of our history, other than wartime, a succession of chief constables saying we can't do our job because we haven't got the resources would have been front page news indefinitely. And, you know, these are not inner city forces now, the chief constables. These are chief constables, most recently somebody I know personally, the chief constable of Bedfordshire has spoken out this morning, and Cleveland as well. And basically, you know, in the era of Brexit, the worry is that government's priority is that, and just about that alone, and these other things have been allowed to go on. Now, it's entirely true. The new Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, who happens to be my MP as well, he's saying there is £1 billion more of public money going into policing than 3 years ago, and he is clear that he will prioritise police funding. Well, you do have to ask what's been going on before, over the years, and dare I say it, there was a former Home Secretary called Theresa May when a lot of these cuts did come in. Now, they were days of austerity. Is austerity over? I seem to remember a speech at a Conservative Party conference quite recently where we were told they were. Well, it certainly isn't coming through to these chief constables.
Well, some people would argue, of course, and you mentioned Theresa May there, that many politicians' focus is on a different thing right now.
Exactly.
And that's part of the problem.
That is the big problem.
But talk us through some of these thought pieces about Theresa May particularly. And I mean, it's interesting. People do complain a bit about talking about personalities around this when it is all about the deal and the issues. But there's been quite a lot of focus on her, hasn't there?
And it would be pretty hard for her to complain after the way she is now campaigning very personally for the deal that she has got to complain about what you're saying. But, you know, she has now moved on, yes, from Home Secretary to other things. And there is something, this article in the Times, grassroots Tories admire the courage of a woman under fire, that there is part of her campaign is being boosted, I think, by a level of sympathy for her, which the question is, will sympathy win the day for her? That remains to be seen, and people at the moment would be very doubtful.
And do you think she's capitalising on that fact with this charm offensive, meeting members of the public, going, you know, speaking to real people in the media, which she doesn't normally like doing?
Do you know something that never underestimate? There is sympathy, I'm sure. Jeremy Corbyn said he had some sympathy for her, you know, on a personal level. And does anybody really want her job at the moment? Would anybody like to be getting us out of the situation in which we found ourselves? I'm not sure.
Well, you're asking some big questions this morning.
Yes.
To which there are many answers.
But let's move on to Black Lie Day.
Well, in the interests of research and the interests of BBC Breakfast, I went shopping yesterday.
In a shop?
Very close.
In a shop, in a shopping area. And I was surprised how quiet it was. But here the Sun and the others have come up with the explanation. Shoppers turned Black Friday into Black Lie-In Day by splashing the cash from under their duvets. And now, whatever the rights and wrongs of this story, that, you know, they were doing everything online with smartphones and tablets, it's not good news, again, is it, for the high street?
Oh, so the story is that everyone's just lying in bed shopping?
Yes, and not going into shops.
They're not. Unlike, we're told, in the United States of America and Brazil, where everybody was battling for bargains in the traditional way that we've come to see those pictures over the years, it's now, in our country, we've decided to stay in bed and buy everything online.
I want to know a bit more about your shopping trip, really.
Okay.
Where were you?
Well,
what did you buy?
I had an incident with a thermostat, a very interesting subject. I'm obviously a world expert on thermostats. At this stage of my life, my thermostat, had a problem earlier this week, and I went out and bought a thermostat.
Did you get a good deal?
I think I did.
Was it reduced because of Black Friday?
That's what they told me.
Do you believe? Ah, well, you see, there's the thing.
I
did you check whether it was more expensive?
I did not check.
Do you know, not that I'm not interested in your thermostat, but please do tell us about, the story of the Express. Which is, I want my child to be Mary, not
Express.
a camel.
Now, yes, indeed.
Intriguing headline.
Nativity plays.
Well, nativity plays. And I'm a great fan of school plays and nativity plays. I mean, I spent 8 years at school trying to get a male part in a school play, which I finally did. And then, of course, also in that career in amateur dramatics, I got a part as an alarm bell. So I understand what it's like. Alarm bell. I know what it's like. And what we're told in this survey, new research has revealed that when it comes to mothers and fathers being competitive, 66% admit the Christmas play trumps sports days and parents' evening. When your child's cast as a donkey, a tree, a cat or a cloud, there's a sense of disappointment. And teachers, sympathy for teachers please, are being abused in playgrounds when their child has not got a better part.
The thing, you know, you mentioned the alarm bell. The thing about playing the alarm bell, well, also, it must be important because it's an alarm bell. So if it doesn't go off, it would make a massive difference to the production.
Absolutely,
pivotal moment in the play.
The show must go on if you're the alarm bell.
Yeah. It's very good. I'm sure people are going to share their nativity play stories.
Please do. Get in touch. Let us know what role you played, or what role you tried to get.
Thank you.
8:27 is the time now. They have the headlines coming up in just a moment.
Our small island continues to reveal an epic history.
We can be there for every exciting moment of discovery.
An extraordinary monument as old as Stonehenge.
It's been a real roller coaster.
A vast hoard of ancient coins.
Everyone is hiding their money.
And a radically different view of our barbarian ancestors.
You had a facial reconstruction done.
Where the very latest discoveries are changing history.
Welcome to Digging for Britain.
Starts Wednesday at 9 on BBC 4.
Hello, this is Breakfast with Tina Dahealy and Charlie State.
Time now is 8:28. Here's a summary of this morning's main news. Theresa May is heading to Brussels to attempt to finalise her Brexit deal with EU leaders.
The Prime Minister is hoping the plans, which include details of our future relationship with the European Union, will be approved at a summit on Sunday. But Spain's Prime Minister has threatened to derail the timetable if he doesn't get further reassurances over the status of Gibraltar.
Meanwhile, the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Arlene Foster, is expected to reiterate her opposition to the proposed Brexit deal when she addresses its annual conference today. The DUP is concerned that plans to prevent checks on the Irish border would leave Northern Ireland too closely tied to the EU. Last night, Mrs Foster said her party would reconsider its agreement to prop up Mrs May's government if the Brexit deal was passed by Parliament.
The Home Office is investigating how an adult asylum seeker was allowed to take up a place at a school in Ipswich. The man, who is posing as a 15-year-old enrolled at Stoke High School, it's believed he may be as old as 30 and could now face deportation.
A police officer has been stabbed in East London. British Transport Police said the male officer was attacked with a knife outside Ilford train station. His injuries are not thought to be life-threatening.
Climate change will cost the US hundreds of billions of dollars by the end of the century, according to a major government report. The White House has dismissed the findings as inaccurate, but scientists are calling for drastic action to be taken to cut carbon emissions.
Early reports show Black Friday spending has fallen compared to last year, even though there were more transactions overall. Barclaycard, which is responsible for processing nearly half of all UK debit and credit card transactions, said it had seen a 12% drop in the total spent compared to the same period 12 months ago.
A new nasal swab test for flu, which can give a diagnosis in just 20 minutes, has helped to significantly reduce bed blocking and unnecessary admissions in hospitals. It was used in trials at 2 hospital trusts, that's in Norwich and South London, and avoids the need to put patients in isolation. Other flu tests can take several days to return results.
Now, recognise this sound? Lion King, of course, but not as we know it. The trailer, the live-action retelling of the classic Disney film, has been released, and it's already had 21 million views in 24 hours. The remake is due to hit cinemas next summer, and its cast includes the likes of Beyoncé, Seth Rogen and Donald Glover.
Looks beautiful. Can't really go wrong, can they, with that one?
Stunning.
Can't wait.
And what a rousing cry that was.
It really was.
Oh, that would wake you up in the morning, get you going, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Sort of thing you might hear before a rugby international.
Yes, the last of which taking place today.
What a day it is
Set
ahead.
the scene for us.
Well, on the BBC, first of all, you've got Scotland, Argentina. Then later on, you've got Wales against South Africa, trying to make it a clean sweep of wins. You've also got sandwiched in there England, Australia. And the argument being, I suppose, that the way it's looking, the gap has narrowed between the Northern Hemisphere teams and the Southern Hemisphere, especially after last week's Ireland win over New Zealand.
And for those people who don't follow rugby union that closely, of course, all eyes now looking to next year and the World Cup.
Which is less than a year away. That's why these autumn internationals have particular significance. Yeah, a whole afternoon and evening then of the Northern Hemisphere taking on teams from the Southern one for one last time this autumn with the World Cup, yes, getting ever closer. So even more reason for those teams to lay down a marker, as Wales can do, looking for a first ever clean sweep of autumn victory.
And about sport, and if it becomes about money, then you change it to something different, and that's when it loses a little bit of its magic.
And who needs Samuel L. Jackson doing the commentary when you could have Ian Robertson
coming up in an hour's time,
the rugby? He's going to talk to him a little later because it's his last ever commentary in the rugby. 50 years.
Absolute legend.
Of that.
Drop for World Cup glory. Immortal phrase. Fantastic.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
See you later on.
Thank you. Let's return to one of our main stories now, and to Belfast, where the Democratic Unionist Party is holding its annual conference.
Yes, leader Arlene Foster is expected to reiterate her opposition to Theresa May's Brexit deal in a speech later. So, political commentator Alex Kane and Aidan Connolly, who's the director of the Northern Ireland Retail Consortium, are there for us this morning. Very good morning, gentlemen. If I could first address a question to you, Alex. Arlene Foster has been unequivocal in what she's said so far. Do you think she might go even further today in terms of her criticism of what's happening in Westminster?
I think it will be muted today because there's still everything to play for. And one thing you need to know about the DUP is that they go down to the wire. They've done it for the past 20 years in negotiations in the peace process here. As long as they think there's anything to play for, they will stay in the game. So I don't think she'll say anything today which damages the potential of developing negotiations. There's still wriggle room. The Prime Minister needs a bit of space. Arlene Foster and the DUP can see that space as well. So I think, yes, I think you will hear fairly calm words today. She's not going to threaten the Prime Minister at this point.
Because the suggestion, Alex, is that there's almost like a game of bluff going on between Theresa May and Arlene Foster. Do you see that? Is that how you see it?
Well, yes, you always give bluff in negotiations, particularly with Northern Ireland. The problem for Arlene Foster today, it's her annual conference. A lot of people are worried about what they see as the diminishing of the Union. They feel that they've been threatened. They feel that the bonds between Northern Ireland and the United Kingdom have somehow been diminished in the past few days. They will want reassurance. I think Arlene Foster wants to be able to say to them, look, it isn't over. There's a lot to play for. The Prime Minister can still be relied upon. So I think, yes, this whole conference is about steadying nerves. They do not want panic. We're still a few weeks to play yet.
Yes, Alex, so you were a Leave voter yourself. If we turn to Aidan, very good morning to you, Aidan. You were a Remain voter, and of course a lot of the issues are focused...
I haven't declared how I voted.
I'm sorry, that's what I was told. I'm stand corrected, my apologies. I just wanted to ask you on some of the business side of this, and so much emphasis has been on how this could or would affect the economy, what's going to happen over the Irish border. What is the business community saying?
Well, for the first time, you have the business community united. If you'd have told me even a couple of years ago that I would be standing shoulder to shoulder with farmers, with food processors and manufacturers, and we wouldn't be at each other's throats, I wouldn't have believed you. I think what's really brought the business community together is that we're looking at economics, not ideology, and people, not politics. We can see how a hard border, we can see how especially a no-deal Brexit would be a disaster for Northern Ireland. The International Monetary Fund said last year, or last week, sorry, that there'd be £6,000 of costs per year per household in a no-deal scenario. And quite simply, in Northern Ireland, we already have half the discretionary income, we have lower wages, we have higher costs for things like car insurance and fuel. So we really can't afford to absorb any costs because of Brexit.
Yeah, I wonder if I could put this to both of you really. How reassured do you think people are there by Theresa May and indeed many MPs across both parties saying no deal simply won't be allowed to happen?
I think as far as no deal not being allowed to happen, we would take greater comfort in people saying that if we weren't less than 5 months away from it, if we weren't less than 5 months away from crashing out, from tariffs, from customs and from real increases in costs that, like I said before, households in Northern Ireland can simply not absorb. What we really need to do is for people like the ERG, people like the DUP and even the Labour Party, if they have something better, let's see the colour of your medal now, let's see what your plans are, because we need to move on this now.
I was going to say, I think the nature of negotiations in Northern Ireland, we won't, 2 or 3 weeks out you always get, oh, it's not going to happen, there won't be a deal, it's all going to crash. That's not going to happen. The joint interests of London, of Belfast, Dublin are geared towards some sort of arrangement, some sort of deal. And my own instinct has been all the way through this, from almost the referendum was declared, that somehow there would be a soft landing. It may not look like it today, but I would be genuinely shocked if in the next few weeks we don't get that soft landing somewhere.
Alex Aiden, thank you very much for your time this morning. Appreciate that. So the DUP party annual conference carrying on in Belfast across the weekend.
It is. Time now is coming up 9:15. The National Crime Agency has issued a strongly worded warning to organised gangs, which it says are behind a recent spike in illegal attempts to cross the English Channel.
So far this month, around 100 would-be migrants have been stopped whilst trying to enter the UK along the south coast, according to the Home Office.
Yesterday, 8 Iranian nationals were brought ashore in Kent. Tony Smith, former head of UK Border Force, joins us now from our London newsroom. Good morning, Tony. What's behind this sudden spike in crossings?
Well, I think what we're seeing is displacement, actually, Tina. We've done quite a lot of good work in Calais in the last couple of years in stopping penetration through there via lorries. There was a report by the Independent Chief Inspector of Immigration just out which shows more work's been done on the French feeder ports to offload people there. But the human smugglers aren't going to give up. They're going to continue to try to find a way in. And what we haven't seen before is this unprecedented number of small boats carrying vulnerable people across the English Channel. So very worrying.
And what's being done about it at the moment? What's being done to stop it?
So the Border Force will be deploying the coastal patrol vessels and the cutters alongside of other agencies, working hopefully with the French, certainly with the National Crime Agency, to stop the smuggling gang at source. What we need to do is stop the boats at source, because this is highly dangerous. These waters are busy shipping lanes. This is not a good time of year. People will die of hypothermia or drowning. That's a real worry. So there will be deployment underway to try and make sure that we stop the flows, but more importantly, I think, to disrupt this gang. It's clearly an organised criminal gang at work, as the National Crime Agency have said, and it's really important that we try and stop these flows now.
And can you give us a sense of the numbers and how they compare to 2017, for example? Because it's November, it's bitterly cold and obviously dangerous to be making those crossings at this time of year.
This is unprecedented, Tina, in terms of numbers. 100 or so people in 12 different instances over 3 weeks is unprecedented. We don't see that kind of thing on maritime. When you compare that, there was a report by the Policy Exchange earlier in the year reckoning 15,000 or so illegal stock entering the UK. 100 is not a huge number, but it is a growing number, and it's a growing worry, because we're not really geared up to defend our coastline against this type of illegal migration. Our tactics have been to deploy to the French feeder ports and to stop there, and of course the Border Force are responsible for the ports of entry as well as for the areas in between the border, and my concern is that we don't have the bandwidth to be able to patrol those if this continues.
And we don't also have the capability of dealing with these organised gangs.
Well, no, because that requires an international effort, and it will require work on the French side to disrupt those gangs. So there are joint activities going on between the UK Border Force, the National Crime Agency and the French police, but we are very much reliant upon them. There have been reports of more and more thefts and acquisitions of small dinghies and boats over on the French side. There's clearly a network working in this way, and once they've got people out onto the high seas, then we are in a very dangerous position. So it does require an international effort, not just a UK effort, to disrupt the gang.
And Tony, just very quickly, is it true, some people are reporting that traffickers are telling migrants that crossing the border will become harder after Brexit?
Well, I don't think that's the case. I think what we're seeing is disruption, and what we're seeing is smugglers looking for people with money. These are predominantly Iranian migrants. They need to get the money from those who want to make it across, and they're just using different routes. There are some concerns about Brexit, obviously, but I don't think that's what the primary cause is. I think we're simply seeing a diversion, if you like, of tactics by the smugglers to use increasingly dangerous routes to smuggle people into the UK.
Tony Smith, thank you very much there. Tony, former head of the UK Border Force.
Let's take a look at the weather for the weekend. Stav's got the details.
I have indeed. Thank you, Charlie and Tina. Good morning to you. Well, this weekend is looking pretty chilly again. We're still in this rut of quiet weather with cold easterly winds. Mostly dry across the country, but there will be rain, particularly today, across southern areas. Some of it will be quite heavy. Western parts of the UK, though, will see the best of any breaks in the cloud, like this weather watch picture here in Wigan. But this area of low pressure has already brought quite a lot of rain to the southwest of England. Yesterday, we saw some thunder and lightning in Cornwall and Devon. And this weather front will be plaguing southern counties throughout the course of today. Further north, it's a dry story, closer to that area of high pressure to the north of the UK, but there will be quite a bit of low cloud mist and murk, a few showers across eastern areas. So the rain then continues mainly to the south of the M4 corridor. We could see a little bit of rain just pushing a bit further northwards into the Midlands at times this afternoon, but it will feel quite cold, colder than it did yesterday, 7 or 8 degrees at best, whereas yesterday we saw temperatures into the low teens. East of the Pennines, we'll see the thickest of the cloud with a few showers. Same too for eastern Scotland, but to northwest England, parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland should see the best of the sunshine, but it will remain cold in that easterly breeze. The rain begins to ease away from the south of the country during the overnight period, though it'll stay quite wet for the Channel Islands. Elsewhere, it looks like it'll be a largely dry night, temperatures no lower than 3 to 7 degrees, but where you get clear spells, there could be some patches of frost like this morning. We're still in the cold air mass on Sunday, still that easterly wind. It's a bit of a repeat performance, I think, with quite a bit of cloud across eastern parts of the country. A few showers here, the odd heavier one for eastern Scotland, eastern England. I think a better day across southern areas too. We should see more sunshine around. There's a chance of some rain across the near-continent, pushing back northwards into southeast England, but it could just affect the very far southeast. Again, the best of the sunshine further west. Temperatures around 7 to 9 degrees, so it will be quite chilly. Monday, again, the last of these quiet, cold, rather cloudy days. Again, most of the cloud across eastern areas, but that easterly wind will slowly be cut off as we replace something coming in from the southwest. Another chilly day there. Now, this is the picture as we head deeper on into next week. We pick up southwesterly winds with a deep area of low pressure, or a couple of areas of low